Most creatives, whether famous or not, have some type of secondary creative endeavor that serves as a conduit to harness creativity and keep fresh ideas flowing. For some, actors take up an instrument, speak a second language, or in this case, shoot photographs and understand photography. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through a list of different celebrities who have a unique perspective or offer some historical context to photography, or even just take some really lavish, interesting photos of their lifestyle. This is the third video in this series, so if you feel so inclined, make sure to check out the other two videos first. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. First up is Rian Johnson. Johnson, most known for directing Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Knives Out, and Glass Onion, was born in Maryland in 1973. He moved to California to study filmmaking at USC and graduated in 1996. After working in the industry for nearly 20 years, slowly grinding, writing, and directing some of his smaller films, Johnson would finally get his massive break and would write and direct the 8th installment of Star Wars. It was during the filming of this movie that Johnson would shoot a ton of behind-the-scenes photos depicting intimate and rare on-scene shots of the Lucasfilms entity. Star Wars fans are chomping at the bit to get more content of their beloved series, and Johnson has even gone as far to say that he does have plans on releasing a full photo book with all of the content that he took in it. Despite this, the director seems to be focusing on filmmaking, which you can't fault him for, following the success of his movies Knives Out and Glass Onion. Regardless, I am excited to see where he'll keep moving, as he's clearly very talented both as a photographer and director. Next up is Karl Lagerfeld. Lagerfeld, a fashion mogul and businessman, most famous for his work with Chanel, was a creative powerhouse. From fashion designing to collaborating with Coke for design to directing commercials, his creative talent and vision was unmatched. Karl was what I would call a Renaissance man. He had many cultural interests and a connoisseur knowledge about it. Photography was important to him and a favorite medium to express himself. He would photograph anything, from people to other celebrities to architecture. It was clear that the creative medium was a passionate pastime of his. Despite not being able to find a ton of photos taken by him, it is still really interesting to see the type of images that he gravitated towards and how they might have influenced his fashion work going forward. Third on the list is Viggo Mortensen. Viggo is most famously known for his role as Aragorn in Lord of the Rings trilogy. Mortensen was born in a small city in New York, but bounced around to Venezuela, Denmark, and eventually settled in Argentina as a kid with his family. His young adult life would be similar, bouncing back to Denmark before returning to the US to pursue a career in acting. He would go on to be a minor role in many B films before landing his breakout role as Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Since then, he's starred in many films, but two specifically that have awarded him with 2 Academy Award nominations, and he also has started his directorial debut. Despite this, he dabbled into a variety of different mediums, not limited to photography. Poems, paintings, and other creative endeavors are just some. In fact, with the earnings from The Lord of the Rings, Mortensen founded, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correct, the Percival Press publishing house. He founded this to help other artists by publishing work that might not find a home in more traditional publishing venues. Unlike many of the other photographers that I've talked about, his photo books and photographs are more about the experience and aesthetic as a whole. He's combining poems, quotes, photographs, paintings, and more. I think Viggo approaches these books as more of an art project than a photo book. Regardless, I think his approach to art and the meaning behind it is one that's truly noteworthy. It truly seems like he's just trying to give a voice to people who don't get the opportunity and understands the value of creating art for the sake of itself and not as a means to an end. Next up is Kenny Rogers. Rogers, known mostly for his illustrious country music career, was born in 1938 in Houston, Texas, to a very poor family, and was said to be the only person in the family to have graduated high school at that time. Rogers began making music in the 1950s with teenage rock and roll, through psychedelic rock, to become a country pop crossover artist of the 1970s and 80s. While I'm not the biggest country music fan by any means, I'm certainly familiar with a handful of songs from Kenny Rogers. I'm an impulsive obsessive, he told Sports and Entertainment Nashville in 2013. I impulsively get involved with something and then I get obsessed with it. So that's what happened with photography. Rogers took his large format camera across the country for what would become the photo book Kenny Rogers America, a tour of U.S. landmarks that was published in 1986. He followed that up with Your Friends and Mine, a collection of portraits of Lucille Ball, Elizabeth Taylor, and other celebrities a year later. He would go on to capture photos at the Country Music Awards, capturing the likes of Reba McEntire, Tim McGraw, Dolly Parton, and more. He would go on to publish these photos as his final photo book. Among Rogers' artistic accolades include Honorary Masters of Photography from the Professional Photographers of America in 2014 and the inaugural Lifetime Achievement Award from the International Photography Hall of Fame and Museum in St. Louis in 2017. Without a doubt, Kenny Rogers is a larger-than-life figure who is tremendous with the camera and any other artistic endeavors that he partakes in. Next is Bryan Adams. Adams, most known for his song Summer of '69, is a Canadian singer and songwriter and is one of the most famous and successful musicians of the last 50 years. Born in Canada, Adams would travel the world with his military parents, but would eventually be raised in Canada. He started learning electric guitar at the age of 12. As he got older, he would do odd jobs to continue to fund his music endeavors until he started to release his own music, and specifically his own debut album. He would continue to be one of the biggest artists of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. His interest in photography began in the 1960s, however. His parents had a camera that they would allow him to toy and tinker with. His uncle was also an executive at Ilford, so they would frequently be getting film delivered to the house. He would later go on to use an SX70 and Rolleiflex camera, which he had high praise for, saying, "Virtually every photo looked so much more beautiful to me than anything I shot before. That camera had something going on. Depth of field was so much more exciting. The format of the negatives was more interesting, and even the out-of-focus shots were cool. Then I started working with real printers. They turned my crappy negatives into boxes of exquisite prints." Bryan Adams would continue on to use a Leica M6, RB67, and other cameras. He started working on the aesthetic for his own albums and videos, so he would have total creative control over his own image. From this, it led to more and more photography work, which led him to lots but not limited to fashion photography. He also has done a variety of different portraiture work and abstract photographs in various different projects as well. He's released 3 different photo books. Wounded covers photographs of young British soldiers who were massively impacted by the wars in the Middle East. In a similar notion, he released a book titled Homeless, which covers portraits of homeless people in London. And in 2016, he released an untitled book which covers abstract images taken on the island of Mystique in the Western Indies. I think Bryan Adams is particularly interesting as a photographer because he covers such a wide array of different types of photos, from commercial fashion photography to activism portraits to abstract landscapes. It's undeniable that Adams is quite a creative, hardworking man who is passionate about his work and projects, and I'm excited to see where his work will continue to mold and take him in his older age. Next up is Heath Ledger. Best known for his role as the Joker in The Dark Knight, Ledger was born in Australia in 1979. Beginning acting at a young age, he would finish school at 16 and begin his acting career promptly, starring mostly in small Australian flicks and TV shows. That is, up until the 2000s when he started getting more main roles in movies such as The Patriot, A Knight's Tale, Lords of Dogtown, and eventually Brokeback Mountain. In 2008, when finishing up The Dark Knight, Ledger was found unconscious in his bedroom, later pronounced dead. The autopsy would state, quote, "We have concluded that the manner of death is accidental, resulting from the abuse of prescribed medications." Heath Ledger was somewhat of a wide-arrayed art man. He was an obsessive photographer who loved taking stills and painting. He would combine the two and draw on photos with markers or paint or nail polish, creating an almost collage effect. It goes without saying, but it would have been interesting to see what else he would have created or starred in, as he had such a complex mind and obviously loved complex storytelling, roles, and aesthetic. And lastly on the list is Stanley Kubrick. Before directing some of the most famous movies of all time, The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, and many more, Kubrick was a photographer, and quite a good one at that. Born in 1928 in New York City, where he showed interest in literature and art from an early age, Kubrick would go on to be the school photographer for his high school. From there, he would go on to work at Look magazine and was known for his storytelling in his photos. From here, he would go on to shoot boxing for Look magazine in the late 1940s and began making short films on shoestring budgets and made his first major Hollywood film, The Killing, for United Artists in 1956. He would slowly garner respect in the industry, carving out a lane for himself in Hollywood as the legendary director that we now know today. His talent with photography is clear in his composition in his movies. Understanding how each frame is essentially a photograph and building your movies around that notion from the ground up is guaranteed to create engaging visuals. I think something that I took away when looking at Stanley Kubrick was the importance to keep moving forward, no matter what. Keep moving one foot in front of the other, creating work even if you're not sure where it'll take you. Kubrick, who is generally quiet and not super personable, would garner necessary skills over the years and years of hard work and determination that led to becoming such a great filmmaker. In no means did that young man who started at Look have the skills or confidence to film some of the most historic films ever created, but over time, by continuing to wander and be curious, his vision came to fruition and is one of the best directors to ever live. Alright, so that's going to wrap it up for my list today. Is there any artists that you think I missed? Make sure to comment them down below. I do think between this video and the previous two, I covered a good portion of the most famous celebrities that are also photographers. I know there are some wives of people, but I don't really see those fitting into this video. So maybe in a future video. Otherwise, definitely let me know down in the comments below which photographer in this list specifically you thought was the most interesting and had the most dynamic or intriguing body of work. I'd be really interested to know and hear why. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for the support on the past couple videos about this. It really has helped the channel grow a lot, and I do appreciate the support from each and every one of you. So until the next video, it is getting nice out. It is getting a lot nicer out here in Wisconsin, so I'm excited to get you guys some more content getting out instead of these more scripted videos inside, show you some of my cameras, show you some of the work, and maybe some travel stuff in between too. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, stay safe, keep shooting, and until the next video, adios.